There's a pattern emerging among the world's wealthiest people that should terrify you. Not what they're saying in public, what they're doing in private. While billionaires tell you the economy is strong and everything is fine, they're quietly moving massive amounts of wealth into assets that only make sense if they're preparing for total system collapse. Mark Zuckerberg just spent $270 million building a luxury survival compound in Hawaii, complete with underground bunkers, independent water supply, and enough food storage to last years. Jeff Bezos has been systematically selling billions in Amazon stock, the largest insider selling in the company's history, not to buy other stocks, to hold cash and hard assets. Ray Dalio, founder of the world's largest hedge fund, has been warning about the end of the current world order and moved massive positions into gold. Not gold stocks, physical gold. Warren Buffett, the man who built his fortune by staying invested in America, is sitting on over $325 billion in cash, the highest level in Berkshire Hathaway's history, both in absolute terms and as a percentage of assets. He's not buying stocks, he's not investing in businesses, he's holding cash and treasury bills, waiting for something. Bill Gates has been buying farmland, not as an investment property, actual working farms across America, over 270,000 acres. He's now the largest private farmland owner in the United States. This isn't normal billionaire behavior. These are people who became wealthy by taking calculated risks, by investing when others were fearful, by staying in the market during crashes. And now, simultaneously, they're all pulling back. They're converting paper wealth to hard assets. They're building escape routes. They're preparing for something they're not telling the public about. And here's what should really concern you. This exact pattern has happened before, 3 times in the last 100 years, and every single time it preceded a massive wealth transfer event that destroyed the middle class while the ultra-rich emerged even wealthier. 1929, right before the Great Depression. 1999, right before the dot-com crash. 2007, right before the financial crisis. Each time, billionaires and major financial institutions began quietly repositioning their wealth months before the public knew anything was wrong. So what do they know that we don't? What are they seeing in the data that hasn't hit mainstream news yet? And most importantly, what are they preparing for? This is the story of the billionaire panic pattern, how the ultra-rich recognize systemic collapse before it happens. The specific actions they're taking right now that mirror previous crisis preparations, and why their behavior is signaling that we're not heading into a normal recession, we're heading into a complete restructuring of the global economic system. Let's start with the most visible pattern, billionaire bunker construction. This isn't speculation, this is documented fact. The super wealthy are building fortified compounds at a scale never seen before, and the details of these facilities reveal what they're actually afraid of. Mark Zuckerberg's Hawaii compound is the most well-documented example. Located on Kauai, the compound spans 1,400 acres, but it's not just a luxury estate. Court documents and construction permits reveal details that make it clear this is a survival facility. The compound includes a 5,000-square-foot underground bunker, blast-resistant doors, independent power generation through solar and backup diesel, water supply from on-site wells with filtration systems, food production facilities, including greenhouses and livestock areas, and perhaps most telling, a completely independent internet connection via satellite that doesn't rely on any ground-based infrastructure. The total cost exceeds $270 million. But that's not what's significant. What's significant is that Zuckerberg, a man who has spent his career connecting the world through the internet, is building a facility designed to function when all normal infrastructure has failed. He's preparing for a scenario where the internet doesn't work, where the power grid doesn't work, where supply chains don't work. This isn't disaster preparedness. This is collapse preparedness. And he's not alone. Douglas Rushkoff, a media theorist, was invited to a private meeting with 5 ultra-wealthy hedge fund managers in 2017. They didn't want to discuss technology or investments. They wanted to know how to maintain control over their security forces after the collapse. Their actual questions included, how do I maintain authority over my security guards after money becomes worthless? Should I use biometric locks that only I can open? Should I stock up on food and keep it locked away from the guards? How do I prevent them from just taking over the compound?
These are not theoretical questions. These are men with billions of dollars paying security consultants and survival experts to solve logistical problems about maintaining control after societal collapse. They're not worried about recession. They're not worried about inflation. They're worried about the complete breakdown of the system that made them wealthy. The New Zealand option is another visible pattern. Peter Thiel, co-founder of PayPal and early Facebook investor, obtained New Zealand citizenship through a special expedited process in 2011. He bought property and established a foothold in what's considered one of the most geographically isolated and resource-independent countries on Earth. New Zealand has since become the preferred escape destination for American billionaires. A 2018 report revealed that over 40% of American billionaires had acquired either citizenship, residency, or significant property in New Zealand. The country's government eventually had to implement restrictions on foreign property purchases because so many ultra-wealthy Americans were buying land specifically for escape purposes. Why New Zealand? Geographic isolation, stable government, abundant natural resources, fresh water, arable land, low population density, and most importantly, it's far enough from major power centers that if global conflict or collapse occurs, New Zealand is positioned to remain stable while the rest of the world burns. But the public bunkers and foreign escape properties are just the visible preparation. The really significant moves are happening in financial markets, and these moves reveal what billionaires actually believe is coming. Jeffrey Bezos has been selling Amazon stock at an unprecedented rate. In 2024 alone, he sold over $13 billion worth of Amazon shares. Not to buy other stocks, not to invest in new ventures. He's converting equity to cash and hard assets. This is the company he founded, the company he built from nothing, and he's systematically exiting his position. Warren Buffett's cash position tells an even clearer story. Berkshire Hathaway's cash and treasury bills now exceed $325 billion. This is more than the GDP of most countries. And Buffett is famous for saying his favorite holding period is forever. He doesn't sell winners, he holds them for decades. Yet he's been steadily selling, including significantly reducing his largest position, Apple, and moving to cash. His explanation when asked is always the same. Valuations are too high, can't find attractive investments. But Buffett has invested through multiple crises. He bought during the 2008 crash. He bought after 9/11. He bought during the dot-com crash. The man who famously said to be greedy when others are fearful is now sitting on the largest cash position in his company's history, refusing to deploy it. He's waiting for something. And based on his track record, when Buffett is this defensive, it means he sees something catastrophic approaching. Ray Dalio has been even more explicit. Dalio founded Bridgewater Associates, the world's largest hedge fund, with over $140 billion under management. His entire investment philosophy is based on understanding historical patterns and economic cycles. And for the last 3 years, he's been publicly warning about the end of the current world order. But his actions speak louder than his warnings. Bridgewater has moved massive positions into gold. Not gold mining stocks, physical gold held in secure storage. In 2023, the fund's gold holdings exceeded 15% of assets under management, a higher allocation than at any point in the fund's history. Dalio has also been buying assets in China, diversifying away from dollar-denominated assets. He's preparing for a world where the dollar is no longer the global reserve currency, where American financial dominance has ended. These aren't speculative bets. These are defensive positions designed to preserve wealth through a transition period that Dalio believes will be chaotic and violent. Then there's the farmland acquisition pattern. Bill Gates now owns approximately 270,000 acres of farmland across 18 states. This makes him the largest private farmland owner in America. When asked why, his public explanation is that farmland is a good investment with stable returns.
But Gates is a technology investor. His entire fortune came from software, where returns are 10 to 100 times higher than agriculture. Why would a man focused on maximizing returns suddenly become the largest farmland investor in America? Because land produces food. And if the financial system collapses, if currencies become worthless, if supply chains break down, the most valuable asset on earth will be productive land that can feed people. Gates isn't buying farmland as an investment. He's buying it as survival infrastructure, food security. The same logic explains why multiple billionaires have been buying ranches, farms, and properties with water rights. They're acquiring the physical resources that maintain value regardless of what happens to financial assets. Jeff Bezos hasn't just been selling Amazon stock. He's been buying real estate, not in major cities, in remote locations with natural resources. His $165 million estate purchase in Beverly Hills got attention. But more significant are the properties he's acquired in Texas and other
Locations that provide geographic diversification and access to resources. Physical assets that can't be inflated away, that can't be frozen by governments, that maintain intrinsic value. Now let's look at the institutional level, because the really sophisticated wealth preservation is happening through family offices and institutional mechanisms that the public never sees. The super wealthy don't just hold assets personally. They structure wealth through complex legal entities designed to survive system shocks. Family offices are private wealth management firms that serve ultra-high net worth families. They've been around for over a century. The Rockefellers pioneered the structure. But in the last 5 years, there's been an explosion in family office formation and a dramatic shift in how they're positioning assets. A 2023 UBS report on family offices found that the average cash allocation had increased to 26% of total portfolios. This is double the historical average. Cash doesn't generate returns. In an inflationary environment, cash loses purchasing power. Yet family offices representing trillions in billionaire wealth are holding record levels of cash. Why? Because they're waiting. They're positioning for a buying opportunity that only comes during systemic collapse, when assets crash 60 to 80%, when desperate sellers are liquidating at any price. Family offices with massive cash positions can acquire entire companies, real estate portfolios, and distressed assets for pennies on the dollar. This is what happened in 2008. Billionaires who held cash bought foreclosed properties in bulk. They bought distressed corporate debt. They acquired assets from bankrupt institutions, and they made fortunes. The same family office report found that alternative assets, things like private equity, private credit, and real assets, had increased to 50% of total allocations. This is significant because alternative assets are illiquid but insulated from public market volatility. If stock markets crash, your private equity holdings don't show a loss on your balance sheet. You control the valuation. You can wait years to exit. This is defensive positioning designed to avoid forced selling during a crash. Cryptocurrency holdings among family offices have also increased dramatically, not because they believe in Bitcoin as the future of money, but because they want diversification outside the traditional banking system. Bitcoin held in cold storage can't be frozen by governments, can't be seized through banking regulations, can't be inflated away through money printing. It's a hedge against government control and currency debasement. The really sophisticated family offices have been acquiring direct ownership in essential infrastructure, water utilities, energy facilities, agricultural operations. Not through publicly traded stocks where you own a small percentage, direct ownership where you control the asset. If society transitions to a period where paper wealth becomes questionable, physical control of essential resources becomes the ultimate form of wealth preservation. There's also been a surge in family offices establishing secondary residences and even secondary citizenships in countries with stable legal systems and strong property rights. Singapore, Switzerland, New Zealand. These aren't vacation homes. These are escape hatches. Legal jurisdictions where wealth can be protected if things deteriorate in the United States or Europe. The citizenship by investment industry has exploded.
Countries like Malta, Cyprus, and several Caribbean nations offer citizenship in exchange for investments, typically ranging from $150,000 to several million dollars. Wealthy families are acquiring these secondary passports not for travel convenience, but for optionality. If political instability, wealth taxes, or capital controls are implemented in their home country, they have a legal exit route. So what are billionaires actually preparing for? Their actions reveal 5 specific scenarios they consider likely enough to justify massive defensive positioning. First, currency collapse and hyperinflation. The movement into hard assets, gold, land, commodities, indicates fear that paper currency will lose value rapidly. When billionaires who made fortunes in dollars are diversifying away from dollars, they're signaling they don't trust the currency's long-term stability. The United States has $36 trillion in national debt. Annual deficits exceed $2 trillion. The Federal Reserve printed over $6 trillion in 2 years during COVID. Historical precedent shows that countries with debt to GDP ratios exceeding 120% and persistent money printing eventually experience currency crisis. It doesn't happen slowly. It happens in a sudden loss of confidence where the currency collapses over months or even weeks. Billionaires holding cash and treasury bills can convert to hard assets instantly. They're positioned to move.
Second, financial system collapse. The movement into alternative assets and physical resources suggests billionaires expect a potential banking crisis or market crash that makes traditional financial assets inaccessible. Remember, in 2008, money market funds broke the buck, meaning they lost value. ATMs had withdrawal limits. Banks failed. For a brief period, the entire financial system was on the verge of seizure. Billionaires who lived through 2008 remember what almost happened, and they see the current system as even more fragile. Derivative exposure in the banking system exceeds $600 trillion in notional value. Leverage is higher than 2008. Debt is higher. And the Federal Reserve has fewer tools to intervene because rates are already low and they just printed trillions. If another financial crisis hits, billionaires expect it to be worse than 2008. They expect bank failures, frozen accounts, asset seizures, capital controls. And they're positioning to have wealth outside the traditional banking system where it can't be frozen or seized. Third, social unrest and political instability. The bunker construction and New Zealand properties indicate fear of domestic violence and breakdown of civil order. Wealth inequality in America is at levels not seen since the 1920s. The top 1% controls over 32% of total wealth. The bottom 50% controls just 2%. History shows that extreme inequality eventually leads to political upheaval. It happened in France in 1789. It happened in Russia in 1917. It happened across Europe in the 1930s and 40s. Billionaires are acutely aware that they could become targets if economic conditions deteriorate and public anger seeks scapegoats. The bunkers aren't protection against nuclear war. They're protection against angry populations. The security consultations aren't about foreign invasion. They're about domestic threats. The escape properties in New Zealand aren't vacation homes. They're evacuation destinations if America becomes unstable. Fourth, geopolitical conflict and potential war. The diversification into foreign assets and multiple jurisdictions suggests preparation for scenarios where the United States loses its global dominance or becomes involved in major conflict. The rise of China as an economic power challenges American hegemony. The BRICS nations are creating alternative financial systems outside dollar control. Russia's invasion of Ukraine demonstrated that major powers are willing to use military force despite economic consequences. Billionaires are preparing for a world where global trade is disrupted, where financial sanctions make international transactions difficult, where conflict could escalate beyond regional proxy wars. Their diversification across multiple countries and jurisdictions is insurance against any single nation becoming uninhabitable or financially trapped. Fifth, and perhaps most significantly, a great reset of the global financial system. This is the scenario where the current debt-based monetary system reaches mathematical impossibility and must be restructured. When debt becomes so large it can never be repaid, creditors and debtors eventually negotiate a reset. This happened after World War II with Bretton Woods. It happened after World War I with the Treaty of Versailles. It happened after the Napoleonic Wars. The reset typically involves currency revaluation, debt restructuring, and redistribution of economic power. For ordinary people, this means destruction of savings, loss of purchasing power, and economic chaos. For billionaires who are positioned correctly, this means opportunity. They can acquire assets at depression prices using hard assets they've accumulated. They can influence the rules of the new system, and they can emerge wealthier in relative terms, even if their absolute wealth decreases. The pattern is consistent across all 5 scenarios. Convert paper wealth to hard assets before the crisis. Establish physical security and geographic optionality. Position cash to acquire distressed assets during the collapse, and emerge on the other side with greater relative wealth and power. This isn't conspiracy theory. This is documented behavior by the world's most successful investors and wealthiest families. They're not panicking, they're methodically preparing, and their preparation reveals what they believe is coming. So what should terrify you isn't that billionaires are preparing for collapse, it's that they're preparing in ways that ensure they'll profit from it. History shows that major economic disruptions transfer wealth from unprepared masses to positioned elites. The 2008 crash destroyed $16 trillion in household wealth, but billionaires increased their wealth by 80% in the decade that followed by buying distressed assets at the bottom. The billionaire panic pattern isn't about fear, it's about positioning. They see the systemic fragility. They understand the mathematical impossibility of current debt levels. They recognize the political instability created by extreme inequality. And they're moving massive amounts of wealth into positions that will not only survive the coming crisis, but profit from it. When Mark Zuckerberg builds a bunker, he's not afraid of losing his wealth. He's ensuring he survives to keep it. When Warren Buffett holds $325 billion in cash, he's not being cautious. He's waiting to buy assets at 50 cents on the dollar. When Bill Gates buys farmland, he's not diversifying. He's acquiring resources that maintain value regardless of what happens to paper currency. The ultra-rich aren't panicking, they're preparing, and their preparations are a signal to anyone paying attention. The system they use to build their wealth is approaching failure. They're not trying to save it, they're positioning to profit from its collapse. And when it happens, they'll be ready. The question is, will you?
If this gave you a different perspective on what billionaire behavior is signaling about the future, subscribe, because when the pattern completes, understanding what happened and why might be the only advantage ordinary people have. The billionaires are preparing, the warning signs are everywhere, and the clock is ticking.